Hello? Hello? Hello?
It could affect electric power, phone service, air travel, major governmental service. As the Vice President said, we're not just talking about computer networks, but billions of embedded chips built into everyday products.
The new year is usually welcomed in with lots of celebration. Now we await the new millennium. The countdown is on till clocks and computers around the globe will shift from December 31st, 1999 to January 1st, 2000. Never in human history has the changing of a date been so widely anticipated and now feared. So many of the most basic aspects of daily life that we take for granted are at risk, simply due to possible widespread computer failure. Whether you see them or not, we depend on computers every day, sometimes for life itself. You assume the grocery store will be well stocked with food, or to be able to pump gas whenever you need it. If you need some extra cash, the ATM is on 24 hours a day. If you work a regular job or get a pension, you expect to be paid at the same time every month. When it gets dark, no problem. Just turn the switch and there's light. When it gets a little chilly outside, you simply turn up the heat. We think it's virtually our right to have water to drink, cook, and bathe with. And it sure is hard to imagine life without the telephone.
The trouble is, most of us can't even imagine losing these services because we can't see the computers that run much of society today. The computers are so transparent, so invisible, that it's hard to even imagine something like the Y2K problem. Hi, I'm Ed Jordan. This is my daughter, Jennifer Jordan. Perhaps you've seen the book that we've written called Time Bomb 2000. I've been in the computer field for 35 years. I've written some 25 other books on computer software. Jennifer has been on Wall Street for the last 7 years, focusing on economics and finance.
There's widespread concern that the year 2000 computer rollover problem, commonly referred to as Y2K, will cause severe disruptions and failures that affect the personal aspects of our daily lives.
The problem is that many computers have been programmed so that they won't recognize the rollover from 99 to 00. Some computers will stop, some will begin to misbehave, some of them will generate grossly incorrect output, which might not matter unless, of course, it's your paycheck. I know this sounds almost unbelievable, but it's not some form of science fiction. Around the world today, hundreds of thousands of programmers are working as hard as they can to fix the problem, but they probably won't have enough time to finish. Nobody knows exactly how bad the problem will be, but we feel that it's best to prepare for the worst, even though we hope for the best.
In this program, we plan to discuss various aspects of personal preparedness, which we think you should be concentrating and working on now. The subjects will include food and food storage, water storage and treatment, lighting, heating, and cooking, personal hygiene, and medical supplies. Let's start with food and food storage. I'd like to hand it over to our host, Avian Rogers, and personal preparedness expert, James Stevens, for food preparation tips.
Hi, I'm here with James Stevens, the author of the classic text on personal preparedness called Making the Best of Basics. And now he's come out with this wonderful resource guide with a special Y2K focus called Don't Get Caught with Your Pantry Down. That's a great title.
My wife came up with that.
Glad you could make it over here. So, James, it seems sort of alarming when you start talking about food storage and food preparation.
Most people don't think about being prepared in terms of having food. They think about money in the bank, they think about life insurance, they think about automobile insurance. But food actually is life assurance. It assures that life will go on regardless of what's going on outside the doors.
And now it just looks like Y2K is what we know is on the horizon, and we should make special preparations.
I think Y2K is the latest, greatest motivator to be prepared, because if you're truly prepared, there are no emergencies. And certainly, if you have a disaster, you can overcome it with food. It helps a great deal.
Well, and the beauty of food is regardless of what happens, you can always eat it, and so it's a resource that doesn't go to waste.
Yeah, absolutely. It renews our lifeblood, as it were. Let me tell you that
start?
Well, let's start with How about some of the food we have here and show people how simple it is? First of all, first rule of storage is to store what you eat. Second rule of storage is to eat what you store. Really tough, aren't they?
Just do more of it.
Just do more of it. The third is rotate, rotate, rotate. Or you can mark it, date it, rotate it. Let me tell you what that means. You want to mark it with some kind of indicator as to when the date is by which you must use it. So we have here a system, and for example, this case of this can of milk shows the date.
That shows that it should be
has
used
two blue
by
dots
May.
by November. By November, it has 2 dots.
Now, a lot of the canned food, though, will last quite a long period of time.
Yes, but industry, the federal government requires that industry tell us the date by which it must be sold. It has shelf life after that, most of it about 2 years.
Because I noticed here, like for example, on this canned ham, that it's got a date of November 2000, so that's going to be around.
That's the sell date at the retail location. It still has valid shelf life, years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
So what we want to be doing is constantly rotate. Even as we're buying, we use the oldest food first and then replenish it as we're using it. So we're constantly cycling through our foods.
Use it by the date.
Yes.
You're supposed to, and you won't lose it.
Okay.
Use it or lose it is the rule.
Let's look at the kinds of foods. I mean, this looks like anything, just anything here you could buy at the grocery store.
Everything here, I think, was bought at a grocery store. They're the staples, such as pasta. You have peanut butter, which is certainly a staple at our house.
Tuna fish will last forever.
Tuna fish, crackers, comfort foods. We call these the comfort foods. They're the ones that make you feel comfortable because they have all the fat in it. It makes you feel good.
There's no reason why we can't have a little enjoyment in our diet, even if things might be compromised and our resources might be limited.
Good tasting food is delightful. That's why we store spices. And we also want to have a good life by having vitamin supplements and
yes, I like a lot
minerals
of
in our diet.
Supplements.
We also store paper products. As you can see here, we have the toilet paper, the feminine products, and the baby products as necessary in food storage. Napkins, plates, cups.
So the case, then we don't have to worry about washing dishes if again, we have special problems with water and availability.
If we plan our food storage around camping, which is what, without electricity, you're going to be camping in your kitchen or camping in your house. Just plan to have a good time at it.
And you don't have to do anything weird. This is all very normal, typical stuff. I mean, what are some special things that people need to consider, like for babies or?
Obviously, we want to have, if you have children, if you have babies in the house, you want to have baby supplies, food supplies. If you have a person with a special diet, such as diabetic or geriatric, you want to have products for them too. And they know what they are. You want to have long-term storage products that will give you health. There's even milk you can now buy that'll store on the shelf for 6 to 8 months.
Don't need refrigeration. That's fantastic.
So you try to plan around the fact that you're up in the mountains camping out and you don't have an ice chest. And if you take that attitude, remember.
The thing about this, this looks easy. This looks very manageable and something that anybody can do.
Anybody can do it if they'll just sit down, determine their vulnerability to the natural disasters, the man-caused disasters, of which Y2K is one, and the personal disasters, debility, disability, death, whatever.
So people should be buying for at least 2 to 4 weeks, but perhaps for even 6 months to a year then.
A person should buy all the food they possibly can, given the amount of resources they have to dedicate to food. We don't recommend that they go out and remortgage the house or to sell the farm to do it, but they should make a commitment to having food on hand, as our forefathers did.
Yeah,
our grandparents always. I went to my grandparents' home, and there were always hams hanging out on the porch, and food and bottles and things. Well, those may not be the best things we can do today for our body, but you can certainly buy the products now with today's technology to protect them and make them available in the future.
Well, this, as you said, I mean, this kind of availability of food has really only happened in the last 100 years, and so this is something the way that we've lived as a civilization for centuries. Now, I could live very well on what we have between here and the pantry. How do we go about, what are recommendations for how to properly store food? What are some of the deterrents that can happen to food?
First abiding rule is store food in the area where you live. It is live food. It has nutrition in it, so you want to give it at least the regard you give your own body.
What about the garage?
Nothing edible should go in the garage. It'll shorten its life, because the things that shorten the life of foods, the storage foods, are, first of all, temperature. Quickly deteriorates food. Light is not good for food. That's why it comes packed in cans, to which light won't go. So you want to protect foods, obviously, from light. Humidity. Keep things dry. Pasta will mold. Beans and other kinds of things will start to sprout if they get too humid. So you want to protect them in these containers from humidity. And also you want to protect it from infestation and vermin. But the most important thing you have to protect all food from is the passage of time.
Oh,
that's why the chart is so important, to keep track of how long things have been in storage and when they should be used.
But many of these things now, because we're looking at really foods that don't require refrigeration,
Correct.
will last often in many cases for years.
Yes. The stored foods, sauerkraut doesn't have a very long storage time, nor do the tomato products, but virtually everything else will store for years.
These are some really nice containers,
Yes.
Airtight, watertight.
If you can keep the humidity out, great.
And
Keep the
with
bugs out.
screw-top lids
Screw-top makes
like
it simple.
that, it can fit a 3-gallon or a 5-gallon.
5-gallon or
yes.
6-gallon.
And then I've noticed you've got these very convenient type of containers that'll fit into any closet or pantry.
That keeps
cabinet.
the popcorn from getting too moist and the potato chips from
Yeah,
wilting.
it
Yes.
doesn't take
Yes.
long. And very convenient, smaller kinds of plastic type containers.
Mostly to organize it. There's not much you can do to pasta except get it wet. So there are many things that you really can't hurt. They are stable when you buy them.
And show us this interesting box that you have here.
For sprouting, one of the most wonderful things you can do for your body is to sprout seeds, beans, grains, because they will have up to 170 times more nutrition
I love
if you sprout.
sprouts in a salad bar.
Everybody goes for the alfalfa, and for pennies you can do that much, and you can mix and match beans and peas to get a great taste. And you can just pour a little salad dressing over them, take them straight, or use this in lieu of lettuce.
Great. I mean, another thing not to forget are a non-electric can opener. You're not going to get too far if you can't open up your cans. Now, in closing, James, I would think people should start preparing now. We don't want to wait until November or December of 1999. When should people start?
Now. Now is the time to prepare. It always is the time to prepare. And if people are truly prepared, there will be no emergencies in their life.
Okay, James. Now we've talked about canned goods and other non-perishables that are typically and readily available at supermarket, but there are also some wonderful alternatives to foods when preparing for any kind of disaster. Let's talk about some of these.
Well, you can actually do your own in-home food production with an in-home dryer, and you can dry veggies and fruits, even herbs.
Yeah.
And you can do flower arrangements if you want. Lots of things you can do. Dry them in your own home. Great.
Flowers in a disaster, why not? What are some of these other things? Let's look at these.
There's commercial drying. And in fact, most of us, if we knew how much dried food we ate, we'd be surprised, because when we eat out, there's a lot of dried food in our products.
This is called dehydrated?
This is dehydrated or commercially dried foods.
Okay.
And virtually everything can be dried. And it comes in cans, and they store for a really long time. You can get a wide variety. It's fairly inexpensive. In fact, you can reduce your cost of living and the cost of your lifestyle by having food like this instead of in wet pack.
Here's an example of the pasta dry.
Pastas are perfectly
and
dry.
here's after it's been
rehydrated. And
just like
mashed
pasta.
potatoes, everybody's familiar with, and you can buy them in the grocery store in many different formats.
I can smell the onion.
Smell the onions.
Coming off of here.
Now, from there, we go to the more expensive method of long-term storage, and that's freeze-dried food. And this is food that's been cooked, seasoned, many times as entrees, and then they're flash frozen. Then they're brought back up in a heat chamber and vacuumed. And so the food retains its size and its cellular structure, but it's totally dry, and it lasts for a long time. But as I said, it's a little bit expensive.
So this is a fully prepared meal.
This has chicken, and it has some red peppers in it, and
the pasta and the sauce and
it's all
everything.
ready to go.
It's great.
Just a little hot water, and we're off and running.
So what are so the advantages and disadvantages of dehydrated and freeze-dried? Let's review that.
All right. Dehydrated is less expensive, more popular, and more options. Okay. It also is less expensive.
I see.
The freeze-dried usually tastes better because it's full meal entrees, and it rehydrates very quickly. It's a little more expensive.
I see. And then what we can do is that people should know about is you can buy these programs where companies will provide you with full food systems for your family for a certain number of people, whether it's a month, 6 months, a year, whatever you desire.
And you can buy it in the dried version, or the dehydrated version, which is a dried version, or you can do the freeze-dried version, or you can mix and match. You can have it either way you want it.
Exactly. We just recommend before you make the big purchase orders, you probably want to try some of their samples before you make that kind of commitment for your food preparation programs.
You don't want to do anything weird, remember? And the important thing is that they eat what they store and store what they eat. So they should know that if they buy it, they must assimilate it into their diet. And the most important part, after you buy it, must store it in the area where you live. Don't put it in the garage, don't put it in outside, keep it in the home where you live.
Very important. Cabinets, above your cabinets, if you have to store in closets, under your furniture.
Underneath the bed, whatever.
Better that than in your garage. But
Right.
you know, I have to try this though. Let's just sample the goods here.
Really good,
Very good. We shouldn't have to compromise our lifestyle, just our quality of life, just because we're in disaster
What is
mode.
your life worth when you're in an emergency?
Well, it's clearly a global problem. I think it's going to potentially affect virtually everyone in the world in one way or another. So I think it's worth everybody's attention at this time.
The year 2000 problem is, in fact, a very serious threat to the U.S. economy. Indeed, it is also bound to seriously disrupt the entire global economy. Currently, I believe that there's a 70% chance of a global recession as severe as the one that occurred in 1973-74 as a result of the year 2000 problem.
It's hard to imagine that something as basic as water could be affected by the Y2K computer problem. But there are two things that all of us have to worry about, regardless of whether we live in a city or the suburbs or in a rural area. First of all, where does the water come from? And secondly, how can we be assured of its purity for cooking, for drinking, for bathing, and so on? Regardless of where you live, there's a pretty good chance that your water supply actually begins many miles away and reaches you through a network of rivers and dams and aqueducts and so forth, all of which have computers at every step. If there's a disruption in the computer systems, there may well be a disruption in the water supply. When it does reach your local community or city, it may have to be pumped up to a high-rise apartment building to actually reach your faucet or bathtub. Again, there may be a disruption either because of the computers or the associated utility disruptions. As for purity, the main thing we're concerned about in most cases is the water purification plants themselves, particularly in the city and suburban areas where there are computers regulating the flow of chemicals to ensure the purity of the water. We're also concerned, at least in some cases, about possible environmental problems. There are a few cities in the United States that have hydrogen cyanide plants located a few miles outside of town, which could have obvious problems with the water supply. So let's turn now to Avian and James to talk about water preparedness.
Well, you certainly can't get more basic than water.
Water is the absolute basic for life.
So now if Y2K were to cause problems in delivering a supply of drinking water, what are some of the things that we can do?
Well, it's very simple. It may not be easy, but it's very simple. One stores a gallon of water per day for 14 days for each member of the family.
So then you just do the math. So for 2 people, it'd be 28 gallons and beyond.
That's correct.
Well, that's pretty simple. So like this is a 55-gallon drum. So this would be about a supply for 2 months for one person. So
Correct.
that gives people an idea of the
Volume.
The volume. Here's 5 gallons.
5
so
gallons.
This would be
About a week.
Yeah, exactly. with this one container. So then, how do we actually? What are some of the types of containers besides this? What are
Well,
we looking
we tell
for?
people to use clean containers. Don't use food containers. Milk cartons are a no-no. Ketchup bottles, things of that nature. And don't store it in bleach bottles. It could be dangerous. Someone might mistake it and drink full bleach, so full strength bleach, and you want to avoid that. So we ask them to store in clean containers. And then you have to get some kind of filtration device. So first of all, how do we treat it? We
Okay.
treat water, first of all, with chemicals. And sodium hypochlorite, which is found in bleach, you take 2 drops per quart of water. You just drop a couple of drops per quart, if it's fairly clear, and you shake it up. Let it dissolve, let it evaporate some of the sodium hypochlorite, and you have drinkable water.
Well, and after all, the water we drink anyway is chemically treated for the most part.
It's very much like what the city water system will do.
And what about boiling?
Boiling is a great way to do it, but you need 20 minutes. That uses a lot of fuel sometimes. So you want to make sure that you have enough fuel to do that with. And then you have to aerate the water after it's boiled.
Okay. Now, you mentioned filtration system. That shouldn't be required for every amount of drinking water.
No, only for dirty water that has stuff in it.
And I wanted to show this simple filter where you just drop the element in and then just pump the water through, and it should come out clean.
Clean water.
Great.
And you put that water into a clean container and you can store it for a period of time.
So how do we actually store water for this kind of volume? Where do we store it?
Water should be stored only in the living area. And the important thing is that we utilize living area because that water is part of our essential needs. You don't store it in the garage next to fuel or fertilizer or your trash because it'll absorb the odors.
So nowhere where it could be contaminated with toxins or odors.
That's correct.
Now what about additional sources of water?
Every home has 30 to 75 gallons of water in the hot water heater, in the plumbing system, in the pipes, the lines that run in the home, in the back of the toilet, not the toilet bowl obviously. And you can fill your tubs and sinks with water if you anticipate some kind of an emergency.
So that might be something that people might want to do the night before the event, is actually fill up their tubs of water. And also even for pools, and like here we have a hot tub sauna.
A hot tub is a perfect way to get water, but you must boil it and treat it in order for it to be drinkable. And a waterbed. I know everybody asks the question. Waterbed is a controversial thing. You cannot drink the water out of an existing waterbed that's been treated with algicide. You must have a new waterbed dedicated to your potable water.
That makes sense. So with the saving and storing of water, and then our knowledge now of how to treat water, we could be able to have drinkable water for nearly indefinitely. This has been great.
Thank you.
The solution, unfortunately, is massive, painstaking, and labor-intensive. It will take a lot of time to rewrite lines of computer code in existing systems, to buy new ones, or put in place backup plans so that essential business and government services are not interrupted. With millions of hours needed to rewrite billions of lines of code in hundreds of thousands of interdependent organizations, this is clearly one of the most complex management challenges in history.
Perhaps the most important of all utilities is electricity, for lighting, for heating, and for cooking throughout our households. Across the country, there are some 8,000 electric utility plants, including 108 nuclear plants, each of which is busily working on its own Y2K project. With luck, they'll all be finished, but realistically, we have to expect that a few might not make it, which means that we might be facing local blackouts in a few parts of the country, or possibly regional blackouts, or in the worst of all possible cases, a national blackout, hopefully for only a few days, but possibly somewhat longer, and we have to be prepared for this. We not only have to be prepared for blackouts, a complete loss of power, but also the subsequent brownouts, the surges, the spikes, the so-called dirty power that will disrupt electronic equipment throughout the house as well as our offices across the land. So let's turn to Avian and James now to see some tips for coping with the loss of electric utilities, particularly for the most fundamental things that we do of heating and lighting and cooking in the household.
When contemplating the possible loss of power from Y2K, there's a lot of things you need to think about to be ready. Now, one of the more obvious things that people might think of are generators.
Absolutely. They do a good whole house job. You get plenty of work out of it, but the point is they're very expensive, take a lot of fuel. fuel is hard to stabilize for long-term storage, so you have to get something extra to add to it for that. Also, a lot of zoning codes do not allow them to operate after hours, which
so
is when you run it.
they might not be the best solution then for everybody. And there's so many different kinds of safer options and also less expensive kinds of things. We've got so many things here. Let's focus on lighting for a minute.
We have solar-powered lighting, which is very effective. It's low light, but it allows you to have safety and security in the dark. And some of these lights can be detached from their normal application in the yard or garden so that you can bring them in the house for night lighting.
And plus something like this will last forever. I mean, you can have energy efficient lighting for as long as you want.
They regenerate every day in the sunlight. Here's a battery. Here's a solar-powered flashlight that also operates on batteries.
Fantastic.
And it'll charge the batteries as it sits in the sun in the daytime.
Now this is a handsome unit.
It's a fairly expensive unit, but it's very effective. It gives out a lot of light at night because it charges during the daytime from the solar power panels that are there.
Now I would think also with longer term, if the power were to go up for more than a few days, batteries, your regular battery powered flashlights are going to start waning and shutting down on you.
That's correct. Well, for the guy who has that application, we have a battery charger that is solar operated, solar energized. Isn't that neat?
That is a true boys and their toys.
And it comes in different sizes so that you can use them in different batteries for different flashlights.
That's great.
Wonderful little device.
What are some of these other, we've got the classic Coleman lantern, which certainly puts out a lot of light.
With a little extra noise, but it is very efficient. And then we have kerosene. We have the barn model for outdoors use that has the safety wind panel, and then we have the indoor model, which gives a little more light, a little more effective, a little higher quality light, but you couldn't take it outdoors.
Very cute. And of course candles are an obvious option, but these aren't the kind of candles that you just go out, decorator candles at the...
These are not tallow candles. They're specially made for long term. These are 8-hour candles. But this can is equal to 120 hours of candles in a very small can, and you can actually cook with that.
So it would take all of these candles to last
the
as long as that. That's fantastic. And we have, what's this cute
This is a crank light. It has, you can generate light by cranking and just turning on the button. It's neat.
Well, here's my favorite. The coup de grace is the crank up solar-powered flashlight and radio.
It has everything.
It's adorable.
How neat.
Now, with a lot of these kinds of things, and people are having to get tools and support for their preparedness, you need extra storage.
Absolutely.
Now, these are the kind of things that can be stored outside safely. So what we've done is we added this prefab plastic closet just on the side of the house, and it just can be jam-packed full of supplies and things that might be needed. It's great.
Fantastic.
Now, James, if we are to lose power, the other thing that people need to think about is what they're going to do about heating.
Absolutely.
So let's go inside and talk about heating options.
You bet.
When you're talking about Y2K and a possible power failure, then one crucial area you have to consider is heating. Now, it's going to be cold for a lot of people on January 1st, 2000, all over the country.
Not a good time to start a problem, is it?
Not at all. So if you can't depend on a delivery of electricity, gas, then you need to take preparations. Now, a lot of people might say, well, I've got a fireplace and I'll just heat that thing up. Well, fireplaces are terribly inefficient, 20% at best, sometimes below zero, because you're actually losing heat up the chimney. So what are some of the solutions?
Well, I think as we have here, a heat and glow insert will give us a lot more responsive efficiency, up to 50–60%.
That's a big improvement. So that's actually a unit that goes inside the fireplace and
radiates the heat outward. Another solution is a wood stove. A freestanding wood stove has a lot of movement and air around it, and so you can get much more efficiency, 60, 80, 85%.
That's fantastic. They do take up a certain amount of floor space, but you could cook on it as well.
And you can purify your water by boiling it while it's operating, sure.
What are some other solutions?
I think kerosene is probably the most popular one and the easiest for most people to manage.
An old standard.
It's been around a long time. However, be aware that it's going to take about 5 gallons of kerosene fuel for 24 hours of operation.
Wow.
And of course that will also operate a lantern for the night hours.
That means 30 of these just for a month.
Just for a month. That's a lot of fuel.
So
it's a problem storing it. It is.
Yeah.
And it's flammable, so you don't want to store it in your home or in your garage.
So you have to have that stored then outside a separate storage area away from the house.
I think you'd want to store it away from anything, especially your food.
Now, what about propane?
Propane's another solution. Propane, if you'd call your local dealer or distributor, they have products that can heat your home that are add-on, can be done after the home is built or added to an existing home. It's fairly inexpensive, but they can heat your home and get the exhaust outside so that you don't suffocate.
So, and again, the tank would either be buried or somewhere on the property.
They'd at least be external to the house, and that's the important thing.
What about safety?
Well, you know, if you're going to have a fire in your home, you ought to have a carbon monoxide device to sense the fact that you might be poisoning yourself. Also, this is a smoke detector. And they're battery operated, as you can see, so it has the best of both possible worlds.
Got to be battery operated, too.
And if you're going to burn a fire in the house, better have a fire extinguisher. And I'd have several in different places and away from the fire so that you can get to them in case there is some kind of fire.
And be sure to keep children away from any kind of exposed heating elements. Now, so there's a lot that people need to think about besides just having a few extra blankets and snuggling up for a few hours. So James, now another thing we need to think about is if we lose power, we're going to need to look at cooking. How to solve the cooking needs. Let's go into the kitchen and look at that. Well, James, if we lose power, whether it's electricity or gas, we're going to have to consider cooking.
That's true, but you know, you can just pretend you're camping out, but you're just doing it within the four walls of your home.
Hey, you can make it a little bit fun, too.
Food preparation in the home on a camp gear is kind of fun. The kids will enjoy it.
Exactly. And this is just a classic Coleman camp stove.
With a big difference, and that is that this is a dual fuel model. It allows you to use both white unleaded gas and the leaded gas that you could siphon from your automobile.
That's great. And then it also has the convenience of 2 burners that a lot of people will like. And here's a simpler, though, a single burner version.
That's a backpacker's version. It's perfect for a single item.
Great. And what's this?
This is a kerosene version, whereas that burns regular fuel or unleaded gas. This all will burn kerosene. So if you have a kerosene heater and a kerosene lantern, you can use the same kerosene fuel for cooking food. It allows you to consolidate your purchases of fuel so you don't have to have all kinds of fuel in your storage.
Again, simplifying things.
Keep it simple.
Now here's a really interesting, very low-tech kind of cooking implement.
This is gel alcohol, and it serves to allow people to cook a meal very simply without a lot of emissions. It's very low on the CO2 and soot, and you can control the flame simply by moving the damper or even turn it off completely.
And it's real clean too. You just open it up like a can of paint,
very
and it's
safe.
Stable. It doesn't. It's gel, so it
and you
stays.
can drop it right into the little convection device, and that allows you to concentrate the heat on the bottom of a pan.
And good stability there too.
Absolutely.
How about even lower tech version, a candle?
A candle. This is like the 6 candles you can use for lighting, and they concentrate the heat as if you had 6 candles in the middle of a pot, and it'll boil water.
That's great. So you always want to keep a lot of wooden safety matches. Of course, depending on the weather, you could also use your outdoor barbecue for cooking.
And if the weather's good enough or the sun is apparent, you can use a solar oven. It's very effective. Costs you nothing to operate it, and it takes a little longer.
That's fantastic. You can actually cook with the sun.
When you're cooking indoors, be sure to keep the window open and be sure to have an ABC fire extinguisher in case of fire.
Also, you want to be sure to get a carbon monoxide and smoke detector that's battery operated, very important. And of course, always keep children away from any kind of open flame.
Safety first, always in the home.
Absolutely. So there's no reason why we can't have the convenience and simplicity of cooking, even if we're having to operate with compromised kinds of services.
Again, if we're prepared, there'll be no emergency for us.
I like that.
This is not hype. There's a lot of very credible, solid citizens that know a great deal about this problem, do view it as a problem. Some of them are optimistic that they will get their systems done, but they are less optimistic that they will all be done. And the other point that I think is really important, and this is where all of you folks can really make an enormous contribution, is the public has to be brought into this issue. We can't get the public suddenly alarmed that this is a problem in December 1999. There won't be enough time to assess the information that they must have on what systems will work and what won't, and then we'll get panic reactions.
Is that better?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer.
You're welcome. In the aftermath of the year 2000, health, medical, and emergency services may not be as simple as putting a Band-Aid on someone's knee. In fact, there may be a great deal of chaos after the year 2000, which may compromise our access to medicine and doctors. In addition, all aspects of medicine and health services rely on computers. These computers are used for everything from billing to tracking where your ambulance is going, to providing your prescription medicines to you, and even the medical devices that you depend on may have some date reliance in them. That's why we think it's so crucial for us to be thinking about this now and to be preparing for our possible medical needs after the year 2000. Let's turn it over to Avian and James to discuss these issues further.
With the possible breakdown of our medical and emergency services, we're going to need to be prepared to handle a lot of our own needs. So James, how do we begin to make those kinds of plans?
Perhaps the most important thing to do is go ahead and have early on in the year of 1999 our medical and dental exams, and then follow through to make sure that we take care of any problems that may be found.
Before the event.
Before the event.
Exactly, because it could be pretty chaotic.
If they find that we need glasses or a different prescription, then we should go ahead and get an extra pair of glasses also. Keep a copy of all prescriptions so that we can have them in our files in case the source we get them from is no longer available.
And also have extra prescription medicine done in case it may be difficult to fill prescriptions the first month or two.
In fact, I would urge each person to have their doctor give them an extra prescription that they can have with them, and to go ahead and have it filled also so that they have a continual supply for at least a couple of months.
Seems very important.
It is. If it's
and what
life-giving.
about medical devices?
If a person is on medical devices, they certainly should have those checked for Y2K compliance.
Good advice. And then in terms of just handling our own family first aid medical needs, a well-stocked first aid kit makes a lot of sense.
Should be prepared. The Boy Scouts are, so we should obviously have our own first aid kit and know how to use it. And you can get good first aid books in the library. You can buy them on every at every bookstore. Those are readily available. And the Red Cross gives free classes usually in the communities.
Wonderful courses, CPR, a whole lot of things. Exactly, and then handling our own personal hygiene, just like we do at the grocery store with our non-perishable and canned goods. We should make sure that we've got our shampoos and toilet paper,
our
soaps, razors, extra things. Like you said, buy what you use what you buy. Just do more.
Let's do more of it. Make sure we have our antacids and our cold and allergy medications because they give some comfort to us. And my wife says you can't have too much toilet paper.
Well, and your wife is right. So I see you've got some tools out here too.
We should have tools to help us because the repair services may not be readily available in the timing that we select. So be able to make minor repairs in our own home, have the tools, and know what to do with them.
Might be hard to get much help.
There are plenty of good books that will help you know what to do next. They're available at the bookstores and in the libraries.
A little self-sufficiency will go a long ways during this time. And what about transportation, too?
Make sure your car is Y2 compliant. You can call a dealer you bought it from usually, and they can help you with that. And make sure that you drive on the top half of the tank, not the F mark.
Maybe fill up on New Year's Eve with 99.
Right. So, and then make sure you have some alternate kind of transportation also, if necessary. And a bicycle is a good investment.
Most efficient form of transportation there is.
It's true. The cheapest one to own, and the titles are very, very inexpensive each year to renew. So we want to make sure that people have mobility.
Yeah.
And in order to have mobility, another thought is having your paperwork in order, your passports if necessary, your working permits. Make sure your will is up to date and that your contracts are clean and clear and without cloud, and that you can continue to operate
and collect or pay, whichever is necessary. Make sure your certificate for your of title is available, and your property taxes, etc., are all taken care of.
Insurances, that
Insurance
kind of
is
thing.
prepaid if you possibly can. Your life insurance, your health insurance, etc. Make sure you have your bank statements for the past few months, year if possible. You cancel checks because they're proof that you've paid, and then just have all kinds of financial records on your investments, your stock investments, your 401k, etc. Make sure you are ready to prove your entitlements, and that would include your Social Security, etc.
That's very important protection. And then we should have probably a little bit of cash on hand.
Well, you know,
I think.
cash is spoken throughout the country, and if you have some, then it makes it a lot easier to be mobile.
Probably throughout the galaxy. In case ATM should be hard to not functioning, at least even for a few days, that would be, having some cash on hand would be very important.
Well, even if everybody rushes to the ATM to get money, you will still have some, because it's probably more being out of stock than it is out of order.
Exactly. And, well, James, this has been fantastic. I mean, to break preparedness down into category by category really simplifies it and makes it easy to understand and easy to understand how to proceed.
Well, if you take it a step at a time, it's certainly doable. If you try to do it all at once, it's overwhelming. So we urge people to look at the categories, start, set priorities, and then make that commitment, because once they make the commitment, it's easily focused on.
Better to be safe than sorry. And now we know how to begin those steps.
If one is truly prepared, there is no emergency for him.
So let's review some of the key areas that you're going to want to implement for your Y2K personal preparedness plan. Organize food storage for at least several weeks and up to 1 year for your family's preparedness plan. Store at least 2 weeks of water for each person in the family. Then be prepared to treat water as you go with bleach, boiling, or filters. Lighting can be handled with a variety of options, from long-burning candles, kerosene lanterns, and solar units. For heating, you can use kerosene, wood, or propane. Cooking is simple with basic camp stoves, grills, and other easy-to-use stove devices. Also, keep a disaster preparedness kit, including a complete first aid kit and personal hygiene supplies and medications. And don't forget to have copies of all your important legal and financial records, as well as some cash stored in a fireproof safe box.
Now you've heard how the year 2000 problem can affect the personal aspects of your daily life. This program is part of an effort to encourage everyone to do their own research, utilize all the resources available to them, and to start early and begin preparing now.
You know, there's a tendency to think of Y2K as only a problem or a disruption or even a crisis. But we have the opportunity to turn this into an advantage or a benefit. For one thing, we're going to be looking at technology a lot more closely than we ever have before in terms of the risks and how best to manage those risks, not only with computers, but also with nuclear energy and pollution and a variety of other areas. And we're also going to be putting priorities back in the right places, I think, because even though technology has done a lot of wonderful things for us, we're beginning to learn that if there's a disruption, what really matters to us are the relationships, particularly family-level relationships. We're certainly not going to be able to get through Y2K alone. At the very least, it's going to take family cooperation, but beyond that, we're going to need cooperation between families within the community. Communities will have to cooperate with one another. States and indeed even countries will have to cooperate to get through Y2K properly. If we can do all of that, we're going to find that Y2K has done something wonderful for us, and we're going to be much better off after Y2K than even now. Thanks very much for watching.